Hello everyone, welcome to Eye on Africa. Here are your headlines on this Wednesday. Unicef issues its largest ever emergency funding appeal. It says it needs $4.2 billion to help close to 60 million children across the globe, including several African nations. As South Sudan waits for a new unity government next year, hundreds of thousands of South Sudanese refugees continue to live in camps in neighboring countries. Our France 24 team went to meet some of them. And the trial for two former Algerian prime ministers begins this Wednesday. The accused face charges including money laundering, misappropriation of public funds, and granting undue privileges. But first, Unicef has issued an appeal for $4.2 billion, the largest ever launched by the agency. It says it needs that money to reach 59 million children with life-saving support. The sum includes almost $1 billion that would go to several Western and Central African nations like the DRC, Nigeria, Burkina Faso, and Mali. The amount the agency is asking for is 3.5 times more than their last emergency appeal in 2010. Earlier, I spoke to Manuel Fontaine, who is the UNICEF Director for Emergency Programs. He explains the massive increase in the funding appeal.
It is due to the fact that needs increase. We've never had as many conflicts in the world over the past 30 years that now. We have outbreaks of disease like Ebola in Central Africa, for example. We have climate change impacts. So all of this means, unfortunately, increasing humanitarian needs. It will translate, for example, if we manage, we translate in the fact that we will treat more than 5 million children from severe acute malnutrition. That's huge. We will, for example, try to immunize more than 8 million children against measles. We will provide safe water to almost 30 million people. That's worldwide. Now, obviously, in the case of Africa, out of the 59 million children that we are targeting with our new appeal, or with our humanitarian aid, with 36 million of those are actually in Africa. So it's close to 50% of the overall appeal will be going towards Africa.
You mentioned earlier new challenges, new factors like Ebola, climate change. How has that affected your mission on the ground?
Well, obviously, climate change has, for example, a lot of impact on conflict. For example, the tensions between different groups on the same resources, the water resources, whether you have cattle or you're a farmer, that creates tension. And we know, for example, in Southern Africa that plays a major role in conflict. And then, obviously, health crisis outbreaks means we need to adapt to a different reality, a different environment. If you look at Democratic Republic of Congo, for example, we need to work closer to communities. We need to make sure that communities understand the particular risk of a particular disease. They accept that we're coming, that they accept new vaccines that they're not used to. So there's a lot of work to be done working with communities. And when you have, as it is the case in DRC, at the same time conflict and health outbreaks and health concerns, it becomes extremely complex to operate.
After several delays, the announcement of a unity government is expected in South Sudan in February 2020, after the completion of complex negotiations between the government and opposition groups. Still, over 2 million South Sudanese are living in exile, mostly in refugee camps in neighboring countries. In northern Kenya, Kakuma camp is home to nearly 200,000 people, mostly South Sudanese. For now, they're waiting to return to their home country, fearful that new clashes may break out. This report from Julia Sears, Bastien Renouille, and Elodie Cousin.
This family fled to Kakuma after the outbreak of civil war in 2013. Recently, Masmina wanted to go back to her country and to her village, but there found only ruins. Most houses were destroyed, and she had to go back to her life as a refugee in Kenya.
When I wanted to go to my field, there could always be someone on the road waiting to shoot me and kill me. And it was the same thing when I went to fetch wood. I'm afraid of insecurity in South Sudan.
For the majority of South Sudanese refugees, it's still unimaginable to return, despite the peace agreement signed in September 2018. Fighting has eased, but the prospect of a return to civil war hangs heavily over the country. Some have decided to take up a trade so they can at least work in the camp. Here, young people are trained to become entrepreneurs.
South Sudan, I could find a job in South Sudan, but someone could come and kill me. It's important for me to find work here in the camp. It's better here. I'm not in danger. Nobody can threaten me with a weapon, unlike there in South Sudan.
The NGO giving these courses recently co-published a report about the difficulties faced by refugees who'd rather go home.
It requires the effort of authorities in South Sudan, agencies working here on the other side, to be able to ensure that this confidence is built in terms of their safety, being able to go back, existence of basic services.
To fulfill the peace agreement, a unity government is set to be announced in February. But for these refugees, many fear the deal could collapse, plunging their country back into civil war.
The United States have said they would name an ambassador to Sudan for the first time in 23 years. It comes as the country welcomed Sudan's new Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok in Washington. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the appointment would be subject to Senate confirmation and that Sudan would restore full-level representation in Washington. The United States had a tense relationship with former dictator Omar al-Bashir. It was during his reign that Sudan was designated a state sponsor of terrorism by the U.S. The designation still stands to this day. For the first time ever, two Algerian prime ministers are on trial. Ahmed Ouyahia and Abdelmalek Sellal are facing charges ranging from money laundering to abuse of office and granting undue privileges in the vehicle assembly industry. Mario Sofos has a story.
The heavy security detail in place at the Sidi Mamed court in Algiers didn't stop a rush of people outside the doors of the courtroom on the opening day of a corruption trial of two former prime ministers, Ahmed Ouyahia, the Bouteflika era's last head of government, and Abdelmalek Sellal, who led the government from 2012 to 2014. The accused faced charges including money laundering, misappropriation of public funds, and granting undue privileges. 3 former ministers of industry and numerous former automotive tycoons are also defendants in the trial, which is being carried out without defence lawyers.
Today, the lawyers decided to boycott the hearing, and the court president decided to continue the trial of all the defendants.
They have all boycotted the proceedings, saying the conditions for a fair trial had not been met and that the government was politicising the case in light of the upcoming presidential election on December 12th. Enraged citizens outside the court on Wednesday denounced the accused and those who seek to defend them.
We are gathered here today against those thieves who are ridiculing us. We'll be here every morning and every night. We feel harassed and insulted. For them, this is just a game.
To the lawyers defending the accused today, I say this: you sold your country today and you dishonored yourself. If you are men, you wouldn't sell your country. The accused have betrayed their homeland.
The trial is the first time since Algeria's independence from France in 1962 that former prime ministers have been put on trial.
A Senegalese tribunal has sentenced the head of a Koranic school where children were chained to a 2-year suspended sentence. The trial has divided the country between those who want to uphold a so-called tradition and supporters of children's rights. Maud Julien has more.
For the followers of Cheikhouna Gaye, the verdict is a victory. The Koranic teacher and the 5 other defendants in this case were found guilty of child abuse, but won't be serving time in prison.
They were all freed. It's a great satisfaction for us. We now ask everyone to express their gratitude to Allah, but we also call on Koranic teachers to review their ancient practices.
In Senegal, a large part of the population believes that begging is part of a child's religious education. But when Koranic students were spotted in chains last month, there was outrage, and many demanded a trial. The head of the Koranic school behind the punishment of the children was arrested, along with the parents and the blacksmith who forged the chains. The trial angered the supporters of the religious leader. Some of them stormed Louga's tribunal, which was later barricaded by the police. Amnesty International says the verdict is a step in the right direction, given the pressure on Senegal's justice system throughout the trial.
We are satisfied with the verdict because there was a lot of pressure on the magistrates, and we were expecting the charges to be purely and simply dropped. But we have a conviction and a suspended sentence, which means that if the religious leader within the next 2 years commits the same offence, he will go back to prison. This is a clear warning to all religious leaders in Senegal that this type of abuse is no longer tolerated.
An estimated 100,000 children are forced to beg in Senegal each day. In nearby Nigeria, there was a series of revelations of torture, abuse, and sexual assault at Koranic reform schools earlier this year, prompting the government to order a crackdown.
Former South African Archbishop Desmond Tutu is in hospital. His wife says he is suffering from a stubborn infection, a condition he has been hospitalized for several times over the past few years. Tutu has been treated for prostate cancer for years, and he rarely makes public appearances. The former archbishop was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1984 for his efforts to end apartheid and promote racial reconciliation in South Africa. Finally, Rwanda has signed a tourism deal with French football club Paris Saint-Germain. It's the second such deal for the country after it signed a similar agreement with English club Arsenal in May. Under the deal, Paris Saint-Germain will promote Rwanda products, while the club's stadium and the women's team kit will display messages promoting the country. In a statement, the head of the Rwanda Development Board said the deal was signed because PSG had a positive effect on the overall perception of the country. Officials did not say how much Rwanda had paid for the deal, but a source close to the French team said it was worth between 8 and 10 million euros. That does it for this edition of Eye on Africa. Coming up next, Live from Paris continues with Mark Owen after this short break.
Sur France 24, la nuit, on est très fiers d'accompagner les Amériques dans leurs soirées, de voir l'Asie se réveiller, et on est là jusqu'à ce que Paris s'éveille.
France 24 es más que solo noticias. Es libertad, igualdad y actualidad. Nosotros damos un paso más allá, con información al momento para analizar, comprender, poner en perspectiva y debatir.
In Live from Paris, our correspondents around the world keep you up to date.
من الطبيعي أن يكون شعارها الحرية، وخاصة حرية التعبير في بلد حرية التعبير.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.